And this brings me to our next segment, which I will call This Day in History, something like that. Although it's the 22nd, 2 days ago, on November 20th, marked the 45th anniversary of action by the American Indian movement on Alcatraz Island. On November 20th, 1969, 89 American Indian boarded boats in Sausalito, California, and made a 5-mile trip across the San Francisco Bay to Alcatraz Island. Upon landing, they declared the former prison Indian land by right of discovery and demanded the U.S. government provide funding to turn it into a Native American cultural center and university. When their terms were ignored, the activists spent more than 19 months occupying the island in defiance of the authorities. Federal officials finally removed the last of the protesters from the rock in June 1971, but not before the occupation had started a national dialogue about the plight of the American Indian. This is from a History Channel website article commemorating the 45th anniversary, of course. And the reason I was stumbling into this is because if you listen to last week's show, I played a clip of activist John Trudell, and John Trudell was involved in this, and I've been really just falling in love with his work and his message. I feel like we're speaking on this from the same wavelength, just, years apart. And I guess it's just that kindred souls thing where I feel like every time I listen to what he's talking about, I mean, back then he's talking about the federalization of the police, the militarization of the police. He mentions a New World Order a couple times. He talks about how the powers that wish they were are doing to the American people and people around the world now what they did to the Native Americans. And I've been saying that for a while now. I learned that whenever I started reading Black Elk Speaks. Check out that book. I've talked about that before as well. It's a great book, history on Black Elk and him telling all he knew about sort of the last days of the American Indian, Native American fight against the European settlers. And I see that John Trudell and those who were fighting on Alcatraz, and then also 2 years later would be the last battle, the Battle of Wounded Knee, where Native Americans were again killed, all the way up until the 1970s. I mean, it's insane for me to think about that they've been struggling for 500 years, and John Trudell talks a lot about that. For 500 years, my people have struggled. And for 500 years, my people will struggle again if necessary. And I resonate with that so much, not as just my people, as somebody who has Native American blood and American Indian blood, indigenous blood here, both to Texas and to greater America. Like, my family is half Mexican, been here in Texas forever. And then the other part of my family is native to America. And then there's some Czechoslovakian and other stuff mixed in there. But so I resonate with this idea of, the people, but it's all the people of the earth, really. That's the thing, is that we're connected to the earth, and John Trudell preaches that message and has done so much good work over the past 40 years. So on November 20th is when the occupation began, but it actually started a month earlier. October 1969, a fire destroyed San Francisco's American Indian Center. An activist group known as Indian of All Tribes set their sights on the unused land at Alcatraz. A handful of protesters first journeyed to the island on November 9th, 1969, under the leadership of Mohawk College student Richard Oakes. They only stayed for a night before the authorities removed them, but Oakes stressed that the landing had been a symbolic act. If a one-day occupation by white men on Indian land years ago established squatters' rights, he told the San Francisco Chronicle, then the one-day occupation of Alcatraz should establish Indian rights to the island. And the Indians of all tribes made a final attempt to seize Alcatraz in the early morning hours of November 20th, 1969, just before dawn. This time with an occupation force of 89 men, women, and children. After sailing through the San Francisco Bay under cover of darkness, the Indians landed at Alcatraz and claimed the island for all the tribes of North America. Yeah. Ignoring warnings that their occupation was illegal, they moved into the old warden's house and guards' quarters and began personalizing the island with graffiti. A message appeared on the water tower reading, "Peace and freedom, welcome, home of the free Indian land." Other buildings were tagged with slogans like "Red Power" and "Custer had it coming." The Indians' first proclamation to the public followed shortly thereafter in a manifesto addressed to the Great White Father and all his people. In it, they stated their intentions to use the island for an Indian school, cultural center, and museum. They claimed Alcatraz was theirs by right of discovery, but they sarcastically offered to buy it for $24 in glass beads and red cloth, the same price that Indians supposedly received for the island of Manhattan. The activists added that they didn't mind that the island was underdeveloped or lacked fresh water, since most of them had already endured similar conditions on government Indian reservations. And this would go on, as I said, for 19 months until they eventually, the government came on and made them leave. They ended up making them leave on June 11th, 1971. Armed federal marshals descended on the island and removed the last of its Indian residents. By then, the occupation force had dwindled to a skeleton crew of only 6 men, 5 women, and 4 children. So, one of the last but very important face-off between the indigenous Americans and the federal government, the United States. Thank you to John Trudell and everyone who participated in that and who continues to be a voice for resistance to this imperialism and this empire, because I have my own experiences and with working with Choctaw and looking at indigenous cultures of other nations, and really just feeling like, some of them are willing and have said, like, we're willing to stop this mine, this corrupt government, etc., with our bodies. Like, we're gonna fight to the death if we have to do this, because we have nothing left and this is the only way we know how to do it. And then I see other activists, indigenous activists, who in their older age seem to not to weaken, but to just become more reflective on whether or not that's an appropriate, or not even appropriate, if it's an effective strategy. And I've been listening to some talks from John Trudell on that, on just reassessing. First of all, I think it's awesome that he just jokes that, like, we really going to buy into this idea of democracy? They're trying to tell us democracy, just vote, majority rule, etc., when they came in and took our people's lands and kicked us off, and they're going to talk to us about democracy now. I mean, it's a joke when you really think about it. And I'm glad that he makes note of that, and really encourages Native Americans not to vote, not to buy into their system. And he's talking about, like, civil disobedience, is that effective? And really, the last talk I was listening, he's promoting the idea of non-cooperation, which is, to me, right along with voluntarism and agorism, non-cooperation and just building structures, building something. And also, where I think that we're on that same wavelength, he's talking about conscious language, not using the terms of the oppressor, and moving beyond that, and then also fighting the tyrant within, and realizing that that's the ultimate battle, that they can't control you if you're free in your heart and your mind. Totally resonate with that.